The Compliance Perspectives podcast is sponsored by Case IQ, a global provider of whistleblowing case management and compliance solutions. Learn more at caseiq.com. Welcome to the Compliance Perspectives podcast. I'm Adam Turtletaub from the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics and Healthcare Compliance Association. Joining us today is Amy Matsuo. Amy is leader for both regulatory insights and compliance transformation at KPMG and is based out of KPMG's national office. Amy, thanks for joining us. In May, the DOJ announced several changes in the area of white-collar crime focus and enforcement. I'm hoping you can take us through them in this podcast. First, what did they say in terms of their area of focus?
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Great to be here. Thanks for that question. I'd like to start by saying that the DOJ policy announcement was actually met in general by risk and compliance professionals as confirmation, really, at a time of obviously tremendous policy change and uncertainty. So its issuance really helps to set and support some of the core tenets of an effective compliance program and sound risk management, including the company's ongoing monitoring and detection, as well as, of course, clear incentives for self-reporting, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But with that, I'd love to dig in just a bit. So to your first question, in a memo issued to staff, the DOJ's criminal division announced revisions to its corporate enforcement and voluntary self-disclosure policy, to its monitor selection policy, and to the corporate whistleblower program. So in terms of revised areas of focus, the DOJ has also revised areas of enforcement focus to prioritize white-collar crimes, really on those that it deems to pose national security threats. So that's kind of the key point here. And by national security threats, they particularly called out areas of procurement and federal program fraud, trade violations, sanctions violations, and provisions of material support to foreign terrorist organizations.
That's very consistent with what we've been seeing over the last few months. There are also changes with hefty incentives for self-disclosures. Can you share them with us?
Yeah, so to incentivize the enhancement of the business's compliance program, DOJ is emphasizing this importance of voluntary self-disclosure in order for businesses to receive what they call the most generous benefits that the DOJ can offer. Now, what I would say to all the listeners out there, it's important to note that self-disclosure, of course, comes down to facts and circumstances. Each company and each instance will obviously need to go through, their legal reviews and determination. But at a high level, under these changes, companies are eligible for really a wide range of incentives that DOJ is putting out there. So things like receiving a declination with no requirements to enter into a criminal resolution. There's potential eligibility for declination for companies with certain circumstances, non-prosecution agreement with a term of fewer than 3 years, 75% reduction of the criminal fine. So I think that got some eyes on it. And we might talk a bit about the monitor, but no monitor, right? So that's applicable to companies that self-disclose in good faith. So I think there's some timeliness to this, right? There's in terms of reporting, there's obviously the incentives, on the monetary side. Eligibility of those benefits will depend on, again, that sort of self-disclosure, timeliness, appropriate remediation, and full cooperation with the investigations, and that willingness, of course, to meet requirements, right, of the self-disclosure, remediation, and cooperation. So some nice incentives there that the DOJ is kind of putting out there, but again, definitely comes down to facts and circumstances.
Yeah, certainly on paper, there are a ton of incentives. And I do want to talk more about monitorships. But first, one of the things I thought was interesting, and you can tell me how significant it is or not, but they're also going to review existing settlement agreements. What are they going to be looking at?
Yeah, this one was interesting as well. So a review of existing settlements is certainly interesting, perhaps not surprising, Adam, in the sense that there's an array of regulatory agencies right now under this administration that are undergoing similar reviews. When you think about the withdrawals and the rescissions and the dropping of lawsuits, right, the defense of lawsuits, for example. But in this announcement, the DOJ actually stated that it's currently going to review all existing company agreements in order to assess eligibility for early termination. So factors that the DOJ is going to take into consideration in that include, but they say are not limited to, the duration of the post-resolution period, whether there's been what they call a substantial reduction in the company's risk profile, the extent, of course, of the remediation and the maturity of that compliance corporate program, and again, whether the company self-reported the misconduct.
So I guess the next question, and one going back to something you touched on earlier, is how are monitorships changing?
Yeah, so this ad by DOJ, I mean, companies for a long time have of course noted the costs of monitors, right? Not just in terms of monetary costs, but operational costs, as well. And so it was written in a way to actually, understanding that, so recognizing that, if you will, in terms of the costs and making those kind of proportional costs. But I would sort of say to your audience, it's really written in a way that I would view it more as guidance in reviewing versus this sort of set quantitative metric for review. So there's nothing in there that says it has to be, X percentage of costs or anything like that. I would say they're just sort of general guidance that the DOJ is going to be using. But certainly in terms of looking at this monitor area, its key points would include kind of balancing costs and benefits, right? The prosecutors are now required to ensure that their advantages to imposing a monitor outweigh the associated costs, both from that monetary and operational cost that I mentioned, that there's some proportionality to that, right? To the severity of the misconduct and the company's profits and size and risk. The specific factors for imposing them. So the seriousness of that wrongdoing, the likelihood of a reoccurrence, for example, the company's overall culture and control systems, and then the costs, right, associated. So what are those imposed fees, the approved budgets, the meetings to the company. So a lot of factors, I think, going into that. Another really interesting point on this one, so similar a bit to what we talked about in terms of settlements, is that the DOJ also noted that it's currently going to be reviewing all pre-existing monitorships to determine if their scope can be narrowed or possibly even terminated altogether.
It's going to be interesting to see how all of this evolves. So finally, what should compliance teams be doing as a result, including how should they be talking to management about these DOJ actions?
Yeah, I think most importantly, the DOJ actions help to serve as yet another point to really reiterate the importance of a sound and strong ethics and compliance program. So it's just one more nugget that that compliance can kind of point to denote kind of the importance of really detection and monitoring and testing and reporting. So I think a few areas. In terms that I would say the compliance teams really can kind of look to take. The first probably low-hanging one is obviously communication. So that's communication and training of staff, not only on the technical things that we just kind of talked about, right? What's in those policy changes, but the continued importance from an ethics and compliance perspective to not have this risk of complacency, right? The need to communicate to management and the board on policy and regulatory changes and emerging risks. This is just part of that, I think. And also sort of prepare to have kind of ongoing and continued engagement with your regulators, right? Show that maturation of your compliance program. With that, it comes with probably two other things, Adam. So one is reassessing your compliance program. So as these policy changes are occurring and the business uncertainty persists, those inherent compliance risks can actually be rising, for companies. So it's really important right now, I think, to reassess the compliance risk program and controls. Where might there be need for enhancement, to monitoring data analysis when you think about some of those whistleblower areas of focus, et cetera, and reporting, and some of those just newer risks. So I think that's really important. It's a reassessment time, I think, for us. And likewise, and probably maybe most importantly, it's just kind of this commitment to compliance. So working really closely with senior leadership and the board, making sure that there continues to be appropriate levels for investment to assets and resources. That effective compliance program is still really, really important. And I think that this can help to just reiterate that. The robustness of controls and processes for that prompt detection, remediation of misconduct or noncompliance. I think just this helps to really confirm how important that is.
Yes, I think it really underscores the importance of creating that speak up culture and trying to drive home to the workforce the need to come forward when you see a problem so that the organization can address it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the speak up culture, communicating that, and it's also having the appropriate processes and controls, around that process. And frankly, the data and the data analytics to it to make sure that you're able to use that data and determine whether there may be things through that speak up that you need to jump on.
Well, it's going to be very interesting seeing how this all evolves and what it means in the long term for compliance and ethics programs. Amy, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us on this topic today. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen. I'm Adam Turteltaub from SCCE and HCCA. I hope we're able to expand your compliance perspective.